Hello, my wonderful Coldplay friends out there. Today, we got a very special video for you because we're gonna be focusing on all the rumors, all the predictions, everything that you thought might happen with Music of the Spheres, and put it to the test and see what was a hit and what was a miss. So I compiled a list of the top 20 things that were predicted because there were a ton of things that we thought might happen, but these are the top 20 that I thought were kind of fun and interesting. Now, of course, before we get started, if you find this video entertaining or interesting at all, I would encourage you to please subscribe. Not only is it really easy to do, all you have to do is click that button, but it's completely free and it is very much appreciated. Really, it helps me out a ton, so I thank you in advance for doing that. Now, without further ado, let's get started. All right, so as I just mentioned, I came up with a list of the top 20 predictions that we had going into this album release. So I'm gonna be starting off with number 20 and then working all the way up to number 1. And it was really cool going into this video, kind of just preparing for it, because what I did was I just looked at all my previous videos and kind of just saw where we went really right with all some of our predictions and where we went terribly wrong. So it's kind of funny to see the progression of that. So I hope you enjoy this. Now, starting off with number 20, the title of the album would be Music of the Spheres. And of course, that was correct. So as we all know, the title of the album is Music of the Spheres, but this was not a known fact. It was kind of speculated that this might be the title of the album because in the release of Everyday Life, there was this kind of leaflet that was with it. And in the middle of the book, it had this billboard and it said Music of the Spheres, and then in the corner said Coldplay coming soon. So a lot of us were thinking, okay, maybe this would be the title of the next album or a song or something like that. And of course, that came true. And this was actually probably one of the first predictions that we had going into this album. So it was kind of nice to see that that was a complete hit and that we were correct on that one. So good job. And now number 19. The theme of the album would be about space. Now, of course, hearing with the title Music of the Spheres, perhaps being the title of the album, we're thinking, you know, this is probably going to be about space, you know, with the picture that was released on that pamphlet. It looked like there were spheres or planets, and we kind of were thinking, yeah, this is probably going to be a space-themed album. And of course, that was completely true because we, you know, had certain songs that dealt with space. A lot of the imagery that was used dealt with space, and a lot of the music videos dealt a lot with space. And the theme and the overall storyline with the album, these characters, very much alien and space themed. So good job with that one as well. And now number 18, that the genre of this album would be more in the vein of pop, and that it would be more kind of radio friendly. Now, this prediction came because we looked at what had happened in previous albums where Coldplay would release an experimental kind of like their own feelings album, and then it would be followed with a more pop radio friendly album. And this one was true. So of course, if you listen to the album, you know that it's very much in the vein of a pop sounding album, kind of like a space pop album. And it wasn't too much of a surprise for us because if we've looked at all of the releases, we had, you know, Ghost Stories. And then, you know, after that was very much a radio friendly pop sounding album. And then we had Everyday Life, and we expected this one to be, again, more in the vein of pop. So good job on that one again. And now number 17, the song The Race would be on this album. And this one was a miss. To much of our disappointment, The Race was not seen on Music of the Spheres. It was speculated that it would be released with Music of the Spheres because we've been waiting for this song for so long. And it was funny because I remember there were a few tweets going around where Phil was directly asked, he's like, Phil, are we gonna get the Race in this album? And he's like, we were actually just talking about that, and you know, we're kind of in the process of, and so we're like, oh my gosh, like they're talking about it? This song's gonna be on the album. And it wasn't. It was so sad. But you know what? We're gonna let them work on the album or work on that song until it is ready, and then when we deserve that song. So hopefully you're looking forward to that song when it actually is released, but unfortunately it was not released with this album. Now, number 16, that this album would have a ballad. Now, as seen with, I'm pretty sure every single Coldplay album, there is at least some kind of slower song, some kind of ballad, sometimes having piano, but something that really pulls at your heart. And of course, this album did have it, so that was correct. Now, with this album, it was interesting because there were kind of probably two ballads on this album. There was Human Heart, and then there was also Let Somebody Go. Now, Let Somebody Go is more of the same vein that we see with, like, what am I thinking? Everglow, you know, it's a very similar ballad like that. So, as to much of our expectations, yes, there was a ballad on this album. And now at number 15, that Max Martin would not produce this album. So with the release of Higher Power, it was said that Max Martin would produce it, and everyone was super excited about it, but they were like, you know what, they're probably not gonna be able to get him to do the full album, right? Wrong. They actually were able to get Max Martin to produce the entire album, and that is very evident when you listen to the full album because it really has his style, and it's very cohesive as an album. It sounds like everything is kind of put together and produced, you know, similarly. So I appreciated that a lot, and I think he did a great job with this album, so good job to you, and unfortunately, you might have been wrong about that guess, but it worked out very well in the end. And now number 14, that at least one song on the album would touch on social justice or have a progressive tone. And this one is true. So, with the song People of the Pride, of course that is a very progressive song, and it's really cool to see on the album, one of my personal favorites, not only in the message, but the sound. It just sounds really cool. But the one quote I have from that came from Chris himself. It says, "Thank you for picking up on the fact that People of the Pride is a big, angry gay metal anthem." So that was kind of funny to hear from him, that he recognized that we picked up on that. We knew exactly what that song is about, and it was just really cool to see. I love this song, hope you do too. And now number 13, that the song Infinity Sign was actually Life is Beautiful. And this one is wrong. So there's kind of a little bit gray area because this song, you know, when we first heard it on that release of those little snippets of each song, we're like, wait, is this Life is Beautiful? Like, it sounded very similar. It had that kind of sequencer sound, and it was very reminiscent of that song. Now, this one is kind of true in a way, because it does use that sampling of ole, 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 ole in this song. So partly true, but it's not actually the full song that we've heard before. And if you haven't heard about it before, just look it up. It's a really cool song that they performed live many years ago. So unfortunately, we were wrong with that one. And now number 12, that the announcement for this album would come on billboards. And this one was true. So as we've seen in previous years, Coldplay likes to kind of just hint at the album or kind of announce it through billboards seen in many different cities around the world. And that was kind of cool to see that they did this again and kind of, you know, had their own spin on it this time with Alien Radio and just all the different locations and the cool lettering, the different language. It was just really cool to see them do the same thing, but kind of just do it in their own way, do it a new way. So really appreciated that and seeing that come to fruition. Number 11, the song Coloratura would actually include a second song at the very end of it. So with the release of this song, we all saw that it was over 10 minutes long, and we're like, okay, wait, how could there be a 10-minute long song? And then we're thinking, oh, well, maybe the song actually has a hidden song, a secret song at the very end of it, and that's why it's so long. It's not actually a 10-minute long song. And of course, this prediction was false. So Coloratura is just a 10-minute long masterpiece, and there was not a hidden song after it, but it was a collection of all these different sounds and genres in one song. So I personally love Coloratura and the way it sounds, and I'm really glad that we were kind of wrong on this one because it turned out to be one of the best songs on the album. And now number 10, that Coldplay would have emoji songs on this album. Now, when I first heard this, I was really confused because I think it was Chris who said something in a quote somewhere that they wanted to have emoji songs, and I was like, what does that even mean? Like, and this actually turned out to be true. So what that meant was that the title of their songs would be using emojis. And as we saw on the album, there were what, like 3 or 4 different songs that just had emojis. Now, they do have their own titles to them, like human heart is seen as just a heart symbol, but we know that to be human heart. So it was kind of cool to see that actually come true, and that, you know, with all the different platforms, them be able to do something like this. Because I don't know that I've ever seen an artist do this before, but Coldplay did it, and it was pretty cool. Number 9. Coldplay would not tour this album. So this was super devastating for us to think about, because Coldplay leading this initiative to be super eco-friendly with touring. We're saying that, yeah, we're not at a good place. We don't feel comfortable being able to tour, so it might be a while before you see us again. And going into this album, people are like, yeah, they're probably not going to tour. And that was actually false. So much to our satisfaction, Coldplay actually is touring again. And you're probably wondering, you know, why did they decide to do this? And they said that they felt like they were comfortable enough. They, you know, are implementing so many different things to be eco-friendly and really lead this initiative, and they're doing great things. Although they're not 100% eco-friendly, they are doing great things. So happy to hear that, and happy to be able to see them again. All right, so the next 2 actually deal with the American Idol performance, the very first performance of Higher Power. The first one, number 8, being that the planets were very intentional and actually dealt with different songs on the album. And this one was true. So this was one of the biggest guesses that somebody made. I did not come up with this one, but somebody was like, hey, you know, they have this many planets and there are probably going to be around that many songs on the album. What if these planets were related to those songs way back when they first performed Higher Power? And of course, like, that being true was just an incredible thing to see come to fruition. And of course, the other American Idol guess, number 7, is that there would be other alien languages. So with the release of Higher Power, we got the language, and it was spotted on somebody's gear that there was another language, and we're like, okay, are there going to be other languages, and are there going to be languages for each of these planets that we see? You know, like, that would be crazy, and that was true. That did end up happening. And later on, of course, we saw all of the papers that were released in Spain during that video recording, which was insane. But somebody else to have the insight to think about this, that's just amazing for that actually to come true. So congrats on that guess as well. And now number 6, the prediction that Coldplay would be doing a song with BTS. And this one was true. So of course they did My Universe with BTS, and that was a huge hit. But there was so many rumors, you know, people were like, oh, these bands kind of, you know, talk to each other, like each other's style, you know, things. And it was just amazing to see that actually come true. You know, it's something that a lot of us really wanted, that some of us, you know, were like, oh, why would this happen? But it did, and it ended up producing one of the coolest songs on the album. So I was really happy about that, and I hope you were as well, because My Universe was just a special moment. And number 5, that Coldplay would release a new single at Glastonbury. Now this one was so up in the air. People were like, okay, Coldplay released a single at Glastonbury in 2011, right before the release of Milo Soloto. And with this album being very similar to Milo Soloto in many ways, is it possible that Coldplay released a song at Glastonbury? And then they released the set times, and they're like, oh, Coldplay has kind of a short set list. Maybe they're not actually gonna be playing it. But I was like, wait, they're gonna pre-record this, right? They're gonna have more time, less transitions, you know? And they ended up performing a new single that was true. So I was super excited to see this, and I remember listening to Glastonbury live, and I'm like, wait, I don't know this song. My first thoughts were that it was a cover, but I'm like, wait a second. This has Coldplay written all over it. And it indeed was a new single. it was just really cool to see that actually happen, because that was one of the biggest guesses that we were like, is it gonna happen, especially with a short list? And it did, and it was just so satisfying to see. Number 4, that Coldplay and BTS would release the single My Universe during BTS's Permission to Dance released episode. Now, this one got talked about so much and got so hyped up because BTS had the song Permission to Dance, and they had this huge contest and were on this episode of Released with YouTube, and then the word got out that Chris Martin would be on that episode with them. And we're thinking, okay, either they're going to release the song or they're going to at least announce that they're doing this collaboration, because at this time we heard nothing. And both of those were wrong. It was the craziest thing because we're like, oh, at the very least, Chris Martin's gonna be there to announce it. It was on a Thursday night and led into midnight. Maybe they would release the song on a Friday because that's when songs are released. And that didn't happen either. So the fact that this didn't happen was one of the craziest things that happened on this journey. And it really got me. I totally figured that they would at least announce it on that day, but that didn't even happen. So it was kind of funny to see that, and we definitely got clowned there. But man, eventually, you know, they did release the song, and it was well waited for. I think they kind of did that to trick us, to get us to be more, to anticipate it a little bit longer. So nice job, Coldplay. Number 3, that we would see the voice that is on Cry Cry Cry, Angelina, back in on this album. Now, this is one of my personal favorite predictions because I didn't think I heard anyone else talk about this before, but I remember hearing this quote, because there's this voice, this really high-pitched voice on Cry Cry Cry, and Chris was saying that, oh, that's Angelina, and she's an alien. And I thought about that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, if this album is space themed, wouldn't it make sense to see this character again, this alien character, this alien female voice? And to our surprise, she was seen again on this album in the song Beautiful. So it was really cool because we kind of got a little bit of lure with this album and heard about this character, Angel Moon, which possibly has some relation to Angelina. They possibly are the same character, or, you know, maybe they're not, but at least we still heard this voice again on this album in Beautiful. Number 2, that this poster was actually Coldplay. That was false. This is definitely one of the biggest moments where we got it wrong. I remember seeing this poster and seeing the hexagon, which was very similar to the hexagon that we saw in Human Heart during the Glastonbury performance, and thinking, oh my gosh, we got a new planet, we got a new language. And it was so funny because everyone was pretty much like, okay, it's probably Coldplay, but we can't say for sure it is because we haven't heard anything. And then these postcards were found with this similar design with all these letters and all these things. And we're like, okay, you know, Coldplay has been seen giving out postcards like this in the mail to random people before. Well, people who signed up for the newsletter. And it was like, all right, this is probably actually Coldplay. And then in the days following, we still hadn't heard anything from Coldplay officially or seen anything on Alien Radio, and we're like, okay. And then it turned out that the people who got the postcards had like no relation to Coldplay at all. And then finally, we heard that it was actually just Fortnite. And it had nothing to do with Coldplay whatsoever. So that was definitely probably the biggest clown of this whole album release, where we totally just got it wrong. And it was just so funny because almost everyone was in agreement that this had something to do with Coldplay, and all the big, you know, fan groups of Coldplay were like, yeah, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But we got it wrong. We got it wrong hard. And finally, number 1. Now for this, I'm actually going to play you this video. And however much those dates do still hold up, I'm kind of leaning towards thinking that the album might be released mid-October. Now this prediction came in part because of this album's relation to Milo Zoloto. So With Milo Zolotto, we had a single released at the beginning of the year, another single released at Glastonbury, and then the album finally coming out in mid-October. And so we saw almost the exact same thing 10 years later with Music of the Spheres. We had a single released at the beginning of the year, another single at Glastonbury, and then I'm saying, why not have an album released mid-October and have this mirrored to what happened a decade ago? And so this did come true. Now, I was super excited to see this actually play out. I know at a very early prediction, I was thinking, okay, maybe September, but then, you know, when I realized how similar this was to Milo Zolotto, I thought, this probably is going to line up so that we get this album released in mid-late October. So thank you, Coldplay, for giving us this album in mid-October and for giving it to us when we need it the most. And that, my friends, is everything I had to talk about these hits and misses of all these predictions and rumors that we had going into this album release. Now, of course, if you had any predictions that you nailed 100%, I want to see you bragging in the comments below, telling me what you thought about this album going into it. There were so many different things, and Coldplay just did an amazing job marketing-wise. So we had a lot of fun with this album, so I want to know your thoughts on it. And of course, thank you guys so very much for watching. It is very much appreciated, even watching to the very end here. So I will see you again in the next video. Until then,